Thomas, citizenry request to address City Council regarding the 2012 Civic election. Need a motion, please? Councillor Mitchell.
I'll move the recommendation that Robert Thomas be allowed to address members of City Council regarding the 2012 Civic election.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Thomas, you can approach the podium, and for the record, if you could state your name, and you have 10 minutes.
Hi, my name is Robert Thomas. I've come to this council to relate my concerns, some of the things I've heard in the community, and hopefully get some proactive action in regards, for want of a better term, Moose Jaw's recent, not always so secret ballot. Personally, I'm no expert, no political scientist, nor a member of a special interest group. I'm here as a Moose Jaw voter adding my 50 rubles of input into what I believe is a very important issue. I fully realize that there are some in the community that are going to say, this is no big deal, and the election is over and done with. Personally, I beg to disagree. From the people I've spoken to in this city, I am very strongly convinced that there are lots of people not happy with the process at all. Personally, I'm not disputing the election results, but I'm very concerned with the process. If I was disputing the results, I wouldn't be here, I'd be before the courts. My concerns with the process go beyond the now apparent breaches of voter secrecy, but other factors as well. Factors that I personally believe create a feeling for many that voting in Moose Jaw isn't fair and open. I'll be honest and state that this isn't the first time I've taken an active interest in trying to ensure a fair, open, and honest election process. The first time I took an active interest was half a world away in a place called Kryvyi Rog, Ukraine, as part of a group of independent election monitors partially funded by George Soros. I have some insight into election monitoring, but as I said, I'm not an expert. Although literally half a world away in what many would consider a more mature democracy, I can see some of the underlying problems I witnessed in Ukraine also evident here. I'm not saying that there were any actions to fix the Moose Jaw vote as there were in Ukraine, but I will say that there are some problems that how the vote is conducted here, and I ask you to take some action and close that. I find it ironic that a couple of years back, the city, through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, took part in an exchange to Ukraine to help them develop a better democracy, when we ourselves have some of the underlying concerns I saw in 2004 and other Canadian observers just noted in this past election. I find it difficult to see how we as Moose Jaw could be helping them when we ourselves haven't closed the loopholes that exist here. From my conversations around the city, I've been able to determine that there were 3 different methods used in regards to voting. One method was where ballots were counted by machine and accepted as marked, one where the voter got a chance to correct their ballot, and one where the ballot was simply put into a ballot box and later electronically counted. Although the differences seem minor, I have some great concerns about the impression it leaves with voters, an impression that people's votes are treated differently. I have concerns about the machines rejecting ballots due to what to be typified as mistakes by voters and problems that happened in the special polls where ballots were simply handed in and scanned at a later time. When I personally cast my ballot in the advance poll, I intentionally did not vote for an entire allowable number of candidates in one vote category. And because of this, my own personal ballot was machine rejected. At that time, I was asked if I intended to vote for more than one candidate in that certain election. I said yes, that was my ballot was the way it was supposed to be. It was reinserted and electronically counted. As I left the advance poll and started heading out, another voter told me correctly by that number who I had voted for. That voter did not see who I had voted for, but he knew by the number I had voted for who I had voted for. Now, as far as seeing the ballot, I did see who I voted for on the one thing when it came back out. Within half an hour of having my voting secrecy violated, I began tweeting about it, where it was noticed by a few candidates, and they responded to, as I understand, the returning officer. I realize that for some people this might seem a minor infraction of voter secrecy, but I also know that given the province's guideline that ballot secrecy is paramount, that it was a major election process follow-up. I've personally spoken to other voters that are adamant that either their privacy or those of the person in front of them was violated when ballots were rejected by the machines. These are not sworn-in election officials who plainly saw voting intentions, but rather just ordinary voters who either saw their own ballots outside of this privacy sleeve, or worse yet, saw who someone else had voted for. Other people have told me that their ballots came back inside the privacy sleeve, but that other voters overheard the number of people that they had voted for. And as myself, they were questioned about why they didn't vote for the maximum number of councillors, not by election officials, but by other voters in line. I understand that despite initially rejecting the idea of not to set up electronic vote counting machines to reject ballots next election, that position has changed and an apology issued. I would like to commend the city for the change of heart, but like to request that this council take the next step and formalize it by enacting a bylaw. We don't need this to happen ever again. I base my request on an apparent third change in the ballot machine settings policy that was distributed to potential candidates, one that's not generally known in the city. On pages 22 and 23, prospective candidates were provided the following that I will now read verbatim. It is important to note that the optical scanner cannot and will not display or show any information as to how any individual person has voted, end quote. For myself, I think by rejecting the ballot and then asking a person if they were satisfied with not voting for the maximum number of candidates has broken an explanation provided to candidates. I think that the words any information are key here. Likewise, it should be noted that prior to each election that council appoints a returning officer. There's no guarantee that the current city clerk solicitor will be selected in just under 4 years to be the returning officer. It can be anybody, and they can put in their own policy. I realize that machines, or rather some of the machines, were set up to prevent what is typified as mistakes. For myself, in this country, there's a voting tradition that a spoiled ballot is a protest ballot. Attempting to correct what is perceived as mistakes might well be going against the grain of true voter intentions. Even if there is an error in voter intentions, does the true nature of the mistake lie with the vote or the design of the ballot and the voting procedure? I tend to lay the blame on the latter. Regarding the double-sided ballot, I was able to utilize an online complaint to successfully track down the family of a special poll voter and ask them what happened. According to a family member, their grandparent was handed what they believed to be a school board ballot, filled it out, and then handed it in to the elections clerk, only to then find out that their ballot could not be returned. In this case, the voter didn't realize and wasn't instructed that it was a two-sided ballot. They managed to vote for the school board, but were unable to vote for council. Even though the voter in this case was a senior, I do not feel it has anything to do with their not being cognizant to vote, but rather I blame it on the poor ballot design combined with being accustomed to the old but highly reliable single paper ballot they've been voting for with decades. This lady, she was in her 90s. She is of that generation that fought for democracy. Her final ballot for the city of Moose Jaw, because she's getting older, has probably been stolen from her. In my opinion, the mistake wasn't the seniors, but rather lies elsewhere, and it's just not right. My final concern lies with the campaign financing, and I'm sorry to state zero rules applying to it. In Moose Jaw, there's no campaign expense limit, nor any requirement to reveal who donated cash to any campaign and the amounts contributed. This past election and the seemingly large amounts spent by some candidates to try to get themselves elected, for me, raises some very great concerns. It helps breed even great voter apathy, and yes, have people questioning who's paying for these campaigns and what they want in return. It strikes against the notion of fair play, accountability, as well as transparency in our politics. For candidates, it can also be a great deterrent to even run. Our local democracy and representation can suffer when someone not so economically affluent or having access to funds through others decide it's not worth it. A feeling of the rich will control government, so why even bother coming out to vote or to run? I think if you combine this loss of transparency with the feeling of losing the secret ballot, the condition exists that people are going to feel that our local elections aren't free and fair, so what's the use of voting? I realize that if you look at it, Prince Albert doesn't have any campaign financing legislation and is unlikely to do so. But as a community that has just set the bar as being a progressive city when it comes to voting, I think we can do better than that. We can send a signal that Moose Jaw is in the forefront and we're not following anybody when it comes to this issue. I ask that Council not simply send my presentation to the city, more commonly known as thank you for your time, and then simply receive and file it. I ask that this Council have the gusto to tackle these issues head on. Go to the voters, go to the bosses, who's really elected you here. Set up a committee, if need be, and enact appropriate bylaw to restore additional faith in our electoral process to make it fairer for all. Let's not have it that we have this not-so-secret ballot again. If not, please don't ask why voters are so apathetic next time. for we have lost our chance to repair confidence and hopefully voter turnout. Thank you.
Thank you.